Christ this morning. Hey, real quick, I just want to say Happy Mother's Day to all of you. Just really thankful. I'm a little bit overwhelmed this morning. I have many mothers in this room, like actual mothers, and so I just want to point out really quickly, because I wouldn't be here, like literally, like not just here right now, but I actually wouldn't be here without them. My grandma Babe is here. My grandma Sanchez is here. My mother is here. My mother-in-law is here, and my wife is somewhere running around. And I'm just overwhelmed. My grandmother-in-law is here. I have so much to be thankful for, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed this morning with God gracing me and gifting me with just some special women in my life. Not to mention the spiritual mothers that I have in this room who've invested time and energy and patience in my life. And so I just want to thank all of you for that. I also want to say Happy Mother's Day to the mothers in this room. This is a really special day, and I'm thankful that you're here because you're choosing to be here. There's a lot of plans probably, so I'm going to make sure I get you out of here on time. But I also want to point out the fact that I realize there's some of you that this is actually a really hard day. And it's a hard day for a couple reasons. Some of you are here and you want to be a mother, and that just hasn't happened yet or can't happen. Some of you are here and Mother's Day is difficult because your mother's not here and you miss her dearly. And so we want to recognize that. We want to be understanding towards that. We want to celebrate with that tension in mind that, hey, this can also be a painful day, and it's something that awakens us up to the reality of things like death, things like difficulty and struggle. And here's the amazing truth about that is the need is exactly the same. So if you're here and your mother's here or your mother's alive and this is a great celebratory day, you need to thank God for that and take advantage of that while you have the time. And if today is a painful day, guess what? Your need is the Lord, because only He could give us hope and comfort and guidance in difficult times and difficult seasons. And that's what this sermon is actually about. Sometimes things happen and you know it could only be God because there's no other explanation. This morning we're going to be in Exodus chapter 2. So if you have your Bible, turn to Exodus chapter 2. There's times in your life where you face situations, and there's times I know I faced in my life where you could be having a great day or things are going really well, and something happens that just seems to suck the air out of the room. Have you ever had that happen? So let me give you some examples. So for instance, maybe you're at home and you're having a great morning, like that omelet you made just came out perfect. Like it doesn't happen that way ever, and it happened. And so you have the perfect breakfast. You wake up a little bit earlier than normal, and so you're not having to rush out of the door to get to work or get to school or get wherever you're going. And so you just have this great morning only to get into your car to try to start it, and it doesn't start. And so you have a great morning, and then the air just gets sucked out of the room. Or maybe for you, you go to work, and you have a great day at work. Your boss isn't being a jerk, and maybe he even lets you out a little bit early, and you get home to find a leaky toilet and a flooded basement. Yes, and you call Danny right away, right? Maybe for you, this has actually happened in our family. You go to the doctor and everything is fine. Everything is normal, and you get home and you get a phone call and the doctor says, hey, I'm really sorry. We actually found something that was a little bit unexpected. We weren't actually looking for it. We need you actually to come in right away. Or maybe it's something as simple, just something as simple as you're having a great night at church. You know, things are going well. Maybe you're serving in Awana, or we have a special thing, and things are going really well. You're really happy. You're really pumped. You feel really close to the Lord and to your church family. And you get home and find out that your DVR did not DVR American Idol or NCIS or This Is Us, and you just don't know what happens to Jack, right? And you're freaking out because this little thing that does seem so little, right, has the ability to just completely suck the air out of the room. And I think this is why we love stories of hope. I think this is why we even love just the simple concept of hope. Right? So we say things. We use this almost daily in different ways. You know, I hope my car starts today. I don't know if you have a car like that. I have cars like that. I hope this thing starts or doesn't blow up, right? I don't know how desperate you are or what situation you're in, right? I hope I have a good day at work. I hope today is not like yesterday. I hope when I get home things are going to be okay. I'm not going to be fixing a leaky faucet or a leaky toilet. I won't have to call Danny. I won't have to do these things. I hope when I walk in, my spouse, I hope things are going to be okay. Now, I hope that DVR works so I can find out what happened. Right? We use this word a lot, don't we? Do you use it? I hope. And here's what I found. Nobody hates hope. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, I really hope I have a crummy day today. I really hope today is just really difficult. I hope when I get home, it didn't record my show. I hope when I get to work, my boss is going to be a jerk. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Yet, in the day-to-day of life, can't we feel so hopeless? I mean, let me just ask you, and let's be honest, okay? Because that's what church is for, right? It's for being honest with each other. Have you ever felt hopeless? And maybe you don't have like a big H hopeless. Maybe you don't feel like life is hopeless. But maybe you have a certain situation in your life, or certain relationships, or a certain feeling, or a certain area of your life that when you think about that area in your life, or you think about that person in your life, or you think about that situation in your life, when you look at it, you just say, you know what, that's hopeless. How about worse? Have you ever been called hopeless? I'm not going to share my story, but in 7th grade, I actually had a teacher look at me and say, you know what, man, you're hopeless. And he was more right than he knew, but he was way wrong too. And so maybe it's not even you, maybe it's other people. When they look at you, they have a sense of hopelessness. And so it's weird because we love this word hope, we love this concept of hope, and yet so often in our life we just have these room air-sucking situations that cause us to want hope but doubt it. And so we often carry around this great desire for something better, but with little expectation that better is actually coming. We live waiting on hope and hoping for hope instead of living with hope. And so as we come to our passage in Exodus chapter 2, this is the atmosphere that God's people are actually living inside of. This room air-sucking environment. This hopeless and dark and difficult way that gives way to uncertainty and a feeling of hopelessness in the life of God's people. Now, Pastor Nathan, and I love saying that now, Pastor Nathan left us off last week with really a cliffhanger. And I love it because let me be really honest. This is history, okay? This is fact. We're not making this up. This isn't fictional stories for us to just give you moral implications. This is God's history. This is truth. But I love how Nathan left it off like a TV show. Like this huge cliffhanger, and he's like, and come back next week to find out what happens, right? Well, guess what? It's next week. So we're going to find out a little bit of what happens, but guess what? God's going to leave us with another cliffhanger. So forgive me, but here it is. Exodus chapter 2, God's people are finding themselves at one time blessed in the land of Egypt, but now because of Pharaoh, this evil ruler over Egypt, he has this fear of God's people that caused him to despise them. And now the ones that were once friends have become foreigners, and those who were close are now outcasts, and those who Pharaoh considered extremely valuable in his life, now he sees as worthless slaves. So Pharaoh puts out this evil edict in order to try to wipe out God's people completely by commanding that every Hebrew boy, every son born into a Hebrew family was to be murdered. And when that didn't work, Pharaoh commanded all the Egyptians, all people, men, women, and children, if they see a Hebrew infant boy, that they are to grab that baby and to throw him into the Nile River. Now, can we all agree that's a dark and evil day in the life of God's people? So we're left to wonder, last week, where is God in all of this? Now, these are God's people. How can He allow something like this to happen? Where's the good that was promised in all this? Or, if I put it more simply, where is the hope? And so our story of hope begins in the home of a young Hebrew couple. And let me just give you the point of this passage. Let me give you the point of this passage this morning. If you want to know what Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 through 10 is, here's what it is. The hidden hand of God brings hope in unexpected ways and in uncertain times. The hidden hand of God brings hope in unexpected ways and in uncertain times. And so this story, Exodus chapter 2, is the story of how God often uses unexpected ways to bring hope in uncertain times. So here it is, Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 through 10. You can follow along in your Bible or on the screen. If you don't have a Bible, we have Bibles on the back table. Please take one, keep it. We want you to have it and to read it. Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. And the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and dabbed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. And she saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her servant woman over to it, and she took it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." In this passage, there are 3 ways, 3 times that God uses unexpected things to bring about hope in uncertain times. The first is simply this, that God brings hope through the unexpected choice of a mother. All right, our story begins with a nameless couple. We're not really told that much about them except the family that they come from. They come from the Levite family, which is important. I'll give you the gist of it. Essentially, they are a Hebrew couple. They're from the family line. They're from the family of promise. These are descendants of Abraham, whom God gave the promise that one day through a son, I would bless all the nations of all the world. So God's people have been waiting for this son. They've been waiting for deliverance from sin and slavery and death and difficulty and suffering. And so this is a believing couple. This is a family that has faith in God. And we know they have faith because what do? They get married. They get married. And not only do they get married, what do? They get pregnant. Right? That takes some faith. Can we agree on that? To get married during this time when slavery was enacted. To have a child during this time when there's an edict out that literally you have a 50-50 shot of losing your child. So this is a dangerous time to get married and a dangerous time to conceive children. Now, I don't think it's a stretch to say the same is true today. A war against marriage in our culture today, don't we? We see a war against motherhood and parenting today, don't we? I was just thinking about this. Marriage and motherhood in our culture is often looked down upon. We live in a culture that literally postpones marriage for careers or travel pursuits or even just personal pleasure, right? We have a cultural perspective of marriage that it's this ball and chain thing that you get tied to and you're just enslaved to until one day you get freedom. We live in a culture where you're encouraged to put off parenting for all kinds of reasons, not to mention that if you become a parent and don't want to be a parent, then you could get rid of the child that actually makes you a parent. It's a dangerous time in our culture to get married and to have children. Now, in this culture, in this time, you were married into slavery, and if you conceive, your child could be killed. And yet, this family of faith trusts God. The woman conceived in verse 2 and bore a son. And when she saw the boy, what did she see? This child was a fine child. A beautiful child. Let me ask you, have you ever seen a beautiful, beautiful, brand new baby? Me neither. And they're kind of gross when they come out, right? Their heads are shaped like alien cones. Their skin looks like a Shar-Pei dog. It's covered in who knows what. It looks like they got sunburned for like a week, right? They're peeling like crazy. And don't even get me started on the smell. But who are babies beautiful to always? I'll go with moms. When Claire came out, I'll give you the short. When Claire came out, our doctor actually left. I know I've told this story, but our doctor, she was bouncing between us and another woman whose doctor did not show up at birth. And Faith and this other woman who we just met were giving birth at the exact same time. So our doctor's bouncing back and forth, and our doctor literally told me, she's like, hey, I'm going to be standing right behind you, but I need you to catch the baby, so as soon as she comes out, I could go. And I said, okay, fine. She said, I'm going to put my hands under your hands. And so I said, okay, great. And so I'm waiting to catch little Claire, and I'm waiting there, and all of a sudden I see the doctor's hands move, and Claire's coming out, right? And so doctor's gone. And I'm like, and so Claire comes out, and I'm like, ugh. I'm like, got it. I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. But she came out, and I'm in my regular clothes, and it's so sad, but I was thinking about my shirt that day. I was like, oh, I love this shirt, right? And so I'm like just covered and stuff, and it's gross. When Elliot came out, it's a very different kind of setting. When Elliot came out, it's like celebratory time and everything's great. But when Elliot came out, I saw the same doctor. I saw the demeanor shift, and I said, you stay in here. Don't leave, right? But I saw the demeanor shift. Usually they would take the baby and then hand it to somebody, and they didn't do that this time. Our doctor pushed me out of the way, and I saw she was kind of wrestling around. Well, Elliot had the cord around his neck, and when he came out, he was just purple, like purple, and it terrified me. He wasn't crying. They took him away, and I lost it. Finally, he was kind of coming back, and I held this purple Guardians of the Galaxy baby. He was just bright purple, and I couldn't believe it. But here's the thing: they're beautiful to their mothers. But there's more going on in this verse. I love this. You don't get this in the English language, but when it says that she looked at Moses, she looked at this baby boy, and she saw that he was a fine child. The actual little Hebrew that's used here is that she looked on him and saw that he was good. Now, where have we heard that before? In the beginning, Genesis chapter 1. God creates all things, and as he creates, he looks on his creation. What does he say? It is good. It is good. It is good. It is good. When this mother sees her son, she knows God is at work and he's going to do something great. She knows God is at work and he's going to do something amazing through this son. She has the hope that this is the son who will bring deliverance. Hope is being born in this Hebrew boy. But remember, he's being born under this evil edict and threat of death. Look at verse 2. So when she saw he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Now, can you imagine how difficult that would be? To hide an infant for 3 months. And yet they do everything they can to conceal their child, but it's almost an impossible task. I mean, how do you keep a newborn baby quiet? That's all they know how to do, is to cry. And so we have to get the weight of this. You can imagine this mother holding her baby saying, "Hush, hush, son, please, we don't want them to hear you. Please be quiet. We love you. We want to protect you, but you have to be quiet." But she could hide him no longer in verse 3. She took for him a basket. Literally, the word is tabah. She took an ark. An instrument we know from Scripture is an instrument of salvation. And she made it of bulrushes and dabbed it with bitumen and pitch. Does that sound familiar? That's what Noah did when he was building the ark. And she put the child in it and placed him among the reeds by the riverbank. You know what river that is? It's the Nile River. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would have been done to him. Now I can't imagine how difficult that choice must have been for that mother. And her name's Jochebed. We don't know that till chapter 6, but I want to tell you because she's just an amazing woman. She makes this choice to get married. She makes this choice to get pregnant, and she makes this choice to eventually hide her son from Pharaoh and to go against his evil edict. She does everything she can in her control, and when she can't control the circumstances any longer, she makes this difficult decision, this choice, that she actually has to let her son go. And we know this takes faith, and she's trusting God that he could do what she can't do, and so she's going to trust him out of faith and not out of fear. Now, can we agree she has every reason to be afraid? Right? Pharaoh's after her kid. She's worked hard to keep her kid quiet, but she just can't do it no longer. Now she has to trust him to the water. She has to let him go. I love this. We get amazing commentary on this story in Acts chapter 7 and Hebrews chapter 11. But in Hebrews 11, we're told this: by faith, Moses, this baby boy, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. They weren't even a little bit scared. Why? Because they trusted that God would protect him, that God would do something. And out of that faith, out of that trust, hope was born in this mother. She did everything she could to bring good to her son and faith in the goodness of God. Right, I'll be honest, this reminds me so much of my own mom. I was not an easy kid. And yet I was spoiled ridiculously. How many of you were spoiled? Okay. How many of you, okay, some of you, you're embarrassed to raise your hand, so you're like doing this, whatever. I see you, okay? How many of you, be honest, you weren't spoiled at all? Liars. I'm just kidding. Okay, you weren't spoiled. How many of you raise your hand, you're like, I'm not really sure if I was spoiled or not. Let me see. Okay, look at me. You were, okay? You were. Because you're here, you're alive. Mothers have a very difficult job. They have to feed you. They have to clothe you. They have to protect you. They have to keep you alive. And depending on who you are, it's harder or easier. I was not an easy kid. I know that about myself. And my mom clothed me. She protected me. She taught me. She did all these things for me, even when I was difficult. And then guess what? I grow up, and I'm still difficult at times. And my favorite thing to do when I fight with my mom is to remind her that I have her personality. And so we're going nowhere when we fight, right? Nowhere, but I'm sorry. But I love my mom. She's done so much for me. And I see how she's a product of the moms she's had in her life. And it's amazing. So moms, let me speak to you just really quickly because I think it's the point of the passage. I'm not trying to force a Mother's Day sermon in here. I think it's right here. So let me just talk to you. Your job is not underappreciated or under-recognized. You might feel like that right now. You might feel like what you do for your kid is just not, they don't appreciate it. They don't understand it. They don't know it. But let me just tell you right now, God sees you. He sees you when you sniff that diaper, and I don't get that. But I'd rather change it and waste a diaper than sniff one. He sees you when you're cleaning up vomit off the kid's bed. He sees you when you're scraping together lunch because your child's just been begging. He's starving. He sees you when you wipe your kid's boogers with your bare hands, even though there's tissue 5 feet away. I don't get that either, but you do it. Moms, I swear, moms are willing to do the grossest things to provide for their kids. Moms, we see when you're doing the hardest things to protect them. God sees you when you have tears because you just want a little bit of sleep. He sees you when you're at your wit's end because you've raised this child who now talks back. And you don't know what to do. You've tried everything, or maybe even now they're gone and they're out of your house and they're out of your hands, and yet you still have that longing to see them know Him and to follow Him and to have a great relationship with you. God sees this. God cares. He sees when no one else sees. He sees when you've done everything in your power, but you just don't have it in you anymore. He knows this, and He sees this, and I want you to see this in this passage. That here, in the midst of God accomplishing His grand, glorious, amazing purpose of bringing salvation to all people in all times, throughout all the world, He's doing it through a mother working to keep her kid alive. And making choices to do what is best to provide and to protect and to ultimately give him away. And so here's the point. Listen, whether you're a mother here or you're not, whether you're a man or a woman, the point is actually the same. Hoping in God means that you make the choice to make the risk. Hoping in God means you make the choice to make the risk. Trusting in God takes risk. I'll be honest, that's why not a lot of people believe in God. They don't want the risk that comes with it. They don't want the choices that they have to make that comes with it. God is asking us to take risks, just as Jochebed took risks. Now, He's not asking us to, wrap your baby up and send him down the Calumet River, right? We'll call the police if you do that, just so you know. That's not an act of faith. I'm not talking about taking unnecessary risks in your life. What I am saying is there's sometimes that you need to operate out of fear and not faith. And you need to start to let go of those things that you're holding on to just because you're scared. And so there's times in our life where we do things and we sacrifice what is necessary for doing what is convenient. There's times in our life where we sacrifice doing what is right for doing what is most beneficial for me. There's times where we hold on to things that we need to ultimately just let go of and demonstrate our hope in God. Let me just ask you, what are you afraid of that's keeping you from putting your hope in God? What are you so afraid of that you need to try to take control instead of just trusting the Lord to do what only He can do? This mother, she made the hardest choice, and it won't be the only time she has to let him go. But she chooses to take her brand new baby to place him in the safety of this ark, this instrument of salvation, into the frightening instrument of destruction, which is the Nile River. Let me just tell you, because I've been to Egypt, I've stood at the Nile River, and guess what? They won't let you go down by it. The Nile River, the current is ridiculously fast. I've never seen a river move as fast as the Nile River moves. The river is full of crocodiles. It's full of disease. It's just disgusting. It's really gross. There's parts of it that are really nice. But where this is going on was not a beautiful place. It wasn't a beautiful river. It was dangerous. It was scary. All act of faith on Jochebed's part, and yet it's the unexpected choice of a faith-filled mother that helps us to see that hope in God is worth it. It's not the only way, though. We see, secondly, that God brings hope not only through the unexpected choice of a mother, but God brings hope through the unexpected compassion of a daughter. The scene kind of turns in verse 5. We move away from Jochebed releasing baby Moses into the Nile, and we come now to verse 5. It says, "Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe by the river." Now, can I just stop here real quick? What river? The Nile. Now, nobody points this out. I mean, I've studied this passage over and over, and nobody points out the fact, what is happening in the Nile River right now? Infant baby boys are being tossed and drowned into the very river that this woman chooses to bathe in. Now, I think, I don't know, so I'm gonna step over here. This isn't Bible. I think while Pharaoh's daughter is very much unlike Pharaoh, and we're going to see that in a second, I think this goes to show just how blind unbelieving people can be to how bad the world really is, and how sinful, and how disgusting, and how destructive the world around us is apart from God. I think this is a warning to us to be careful that we don't get so mixed up in the mess of this world that the mud of sin and selfishness becomes normal. Now, that's me. That's not Bible, so please just take that from my heart to yours. So she's bathing, and while her young women walked beside the river, they're taking care of her, she saw the basket among the reeds. And she sent her servant woman, and she took it, and when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. Right? No doubt, right? If he was crying before and she sent him, there's no doubt he'd be crying now. And there's a point of irony here, isn't there? Because who discovers the baby boy? The daughter of who? Now, who's Pharaoh? The very man, the very evil man, who enacted the edict to wipe out the Hebrews, God's people, was also, he also enacted the Egyptian servants, the very women that are with Pharaoh's daughter, to kill any Hebrew boy they come across. And yet in verse 6, we find out that Pharaoh's daughter and the servants of Pharaoh's daughter, instead of killing Moses, what do they do in verse 6? It says she took, what? Pity. Compassion. And she said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." And I love this because I think what the point of this entire thing is that hoping in God means that you see how God can use some of the most unlikely people in your life to teach you and to reach you. He will use whatever to bring about His greatest good and grace in your life. I love this. Listen to me. This is very, very practical for your life right now. I want you to think for a moment. I asked you earlier, but I want you to think right now in your head, if you got to close your eyes to do it, whatever you need to do, think for a moment. What is that area of your life, that person in your life, that situation in your life that you feel completely hopeless about? When you think about that person, hopeless. When you think about that situation, hopeless. When you think about that relationship, hopeless. Now think about that thing. And what we learn right here is that very thing that you feel hopeless about, God wants to use that to bring you hope. That thing you feel hopeless about is the very thing that God wants to use to give you hope. Because maybe you can't work that situation out, but He can work that situation out. Maybe you can't work that relationship out, but He could work that relationship out. Maybe you can't work that situation out, but He can work that situation out. Here's the problem. We try way too hard to put our hope in our own ability to hope and not that God can bring hope. Does that make sense? Let me say it again because like 3 of you said yes, and so I want to make sure you get this. We trust in our ability to hope rather than the God who brings hope into our life. Maybe the reason you feel so hopeless about that situation is because you're trying too hard to hope instead of trusting the God who brings hope into your life. So God wants to use this. Do you see his hidden hand here at work? I mean, what would cause this woman to come to this spot in this river at this time to discover this basket with this boy and to respond in this way? God and his hand brings hope in unexpected ways in uncertain times. Here God uses Pharaoh's daughter, the very daughter of the man who was trying to wipe them out, to bring about the Hebrews' greatest hope, Moses. Look at verse 10. We see her interaction with this baby. Later, it's when the child grew older, we'll talk about that in a moment, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. Now that's really important for next week. He became the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and she named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. Listen to me. God's hope is so often wrapped up in humor. And it's what I love about God. There are things that you will go through that are just so painful, so difficult, but at some time you'll be able to look back and actually laugh at what God was doing. You see, Pharaoh's daughter decides, and by the way, we don't know Pharaoh's daughter's name, right? We don't even know Pharaoh's name. God doesn't even give us their names because they're not important. What is important is the name of this boy. And she names him Moses. And Moses in Egyptian it's the word for son or boy. But in Hebrew, and the Egyptian woman would have known this, in Hebrew, the word Moses actually sounds like the Hebrew word for drawn out or pulled out of the river. That's why they say there, because I drew him out of the water. Now, there's irony there. Because not to give you spoilers, but what's going to happen later? This little baby boy that she drew out of the water will eventually draw God's people out of Egypt through water. And that thread continues. I'll tell you about Jesus in a moment. And so she thinks she's naming him Moses, but God is the one in control. God is the one working all things, and he's using some irony here. He used an Egyptian unbeliever to bring about hope. Let me just say, if God can use her, if God can use that, then in your life, what can't God use to give you some hope this morning? And so verse 10, it says that when he grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. We're kind of left, who is she? Well, let's look back at verse 7. Because tucked in this passage is one more kind of unexpected way that God brings hope. Not only does he bring hope through the unexpected choice of a mother, and not only does he bring hope through the unexpected compassion of a daughter, but God brings hope through the unexpected courage of a sister. After Pharaoh's daughter discovers baby Moses in the water, Moses' sister actually comes along in verse 7. In verse 7 it says, Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? Verse 8, And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. So the girl went and called who? The child's mother, Moses' mother, Jochebed, who placed him in the water, who let him go. He floated down the Nile to Pharaoh's daughter, and now she receives him back to nurse him, most scholars believe, for about 3 years. A nurse at this time was considered called a wet nurse. It was a woman that would take care of an infant. She would feed the infant. She would do all of these things, and that's going to be important. I'll tell you about that in a second. But she would be able to do this for 3 years. Verse 9, And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child away and nurse him for me, and it gets better. And guess what? I will give you your what? Wages. Can we talk about this for a second? Not only did God work this out to where Moses would be returned back to his mother, but now what is she doing? She's getting paid to take care of her own kid. Man, if I had $1 for every... Never mind. She's going to get paid. God is going to pay her. He's going to take care of her. He's going to provide for her after her trust and faith to let this child go. So the woman took the child and nursed him. Now, how did all of this come about? It's God's hidden hand, but God uses unexpected ways, right? Moses' sister, who most scholars believe was between the age of 6 and 8 during this time, comes to the princess of Egypt and comes up with this amazing plan. As soon as she gets the child, Moses' sister comes and she says, Miss, Princess, congratulations. Happy Mother's Day. You know, I know you're going to need someone to nurse this baby, so would you like me to go find a Hebrew woman to nurse that baby for you? I'll go and do it. I want you to be happy in this moment. Now, where were you when you were 6? I was like playing Nintendo, picking my nose, trying to avoid going to school. Like, that was what I was doing. I definitely wasn't standing before the president's daughter trying to give counsel. And yet, here, Miriam, Moses' sister, is there giving counsel, and not just regular counsel, amazing counsel that would provide for Moses' mother 3 years where she could care for him, where she could feed him, where she could teach him, where she could love him, where she could play with him, where she could protect him, where she could provide for him, all without the fear of Moses being taken away. Man, don't you just love how God works things out? How in the most uncertain of times, in the most difficult and hopeless of situations, God works things out for us. Now, if the story ended here, it would be amazing, wouldn't it? Moses back with his mother. She's caring for him. She's loving him. She's taking care of him. That would be an amazing ending. But that would just be great hope for one family. But that's not God's plan, right? God's plan is to bring hope to all people, all families, through this son. What this meant was eventually Moses' mother was once again going to have to trust God and let her baby boy go again. We see this in verse 10. Man, what hope, what faith on her part. It says, when the child grew older, that's about 3 years, she brought him, Moses' mother brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and now he became her son. Can you imagine the difficulty? She named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. Now, these are uncertain times. These are difficult times. We don't know the end yet, but we could see God's hidden hand here at work in unexpected ways. One day, another baby would be born in very similar circumstances. This baby boy would be a Hebrew boy born under the death threat of a tyrannical king. He'd be a son who was given up by his father and adopted by a mother. He's a son that would come really in the most unusual ways, not in ark, but in a manger. And when everything around him seems so utterly hopeless, this son comes to bring hope through living a perfect life, through teaching and showing God's people what God is like and a relationship with God is like, and ultimately fulfilling the greatest promise of God to all, that rescue and redemption it's not just coming, and it's not just the hope of that it's coming, but it's actually here. This Son, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, who left heaven to come to us, through him, God brings the greatest sense of hope in the most unexpected way, through death. His own Son would pass through the water and come to the cross to save us, not from slavery in Egypt, not from just suffering here today in Highland and Northwest Indiana, not even just to give us hope in our circumstances or our situations, but ultimately to give us hope through saving us from our sin. So let me just ask you this morning, where are you putting your hope today? Are you just hoping in hope? Is it in Jesus Christ who is God using to bring that hope in your life today? Is God using maybe a difficult person or a difficult circumstance in your life to say, hey, listen, wake up. Stop trusting your own ability to hope and trust me. What do you need to let go of in order to put your faith in the God of living hope?